Welcome guys, I'm the bartender. I make cocktails and play video games, and this is my ranking of the boss fights of Lies of P from worst to best. Making mixed drinks and playing video games are two of my favorite pastimes, and Lies of P is an absolutely wonderful Souls-like. Lies of P, to me, felt like a true Souls game, worthy of a place among the greats. While it's not perfect, it does so many things well. To me, it's a masterpiece in gaming. The footage you're about to see is from my first playthrough of the game, so this ranking is based on one playthrough and my first impressions. I'm sure after many playthroughs it would change, but like real life, first impressions are very important. I'm also throwing in an additional second ranking of the best cocktails I've made on the channel. So 2 rankings for the price of 1. No stalker fights, since most all those are optional and all kind of the same for the most part. For the cocktails, I did roughly 2 to 3 drinks per episode, so I'm just going to take my favorite from each episode and put them alongside each boss in the same order. So the worst boss will be with the worst drink, and the best boss will be with the best drink. This list is entirely my own and purely subjective. So if you disagree with my rankings, please bring as much attention as you can as to how bad I am at the game in the comments and how I need to get good. Without further ado, let's trash on my least favorite boss in Lies of P. Number 17, Black Rabbit Brotherhood 2, Electric Boogaloo. I've got a lot to say about this one, so buckle up. Does anyone like this fight? Seriously, I'm not sure what they were smoking at Neowit's headquarters when they came up with this idea, but I'm pretty sure it was laced with PCP. For those who are unaware, let me break it down for you. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood is an early game fight where you fight the eldest of the family, and periodically as you chip away at his health, every third of his health, one of his siblings will join and become the aggressor, while the eldest takes a passive role, so you have to mind your positioning while you take out the younger siblings and fight the eldest in between and at the end. It's chaotic, but quite enjoyable fight in my opinion. This fight though, takes that first fight, pulls a plastic bag over its head, beats it with a cinder block, and throws its mangled corpse in the shallow river. Now, you have to fight all 3 siblings at once. They all inflict some of the most annoying status ailments in the game, including overheat and decay. It's an impressively tight arena that makes it very easy to get caught on obstacles and backed into walls, and once you defeat 2 of 3 of the siblings, the eldest comes back to life, rejoins the fight, and then they are both equally as aggressive, trying to end your pathetic little life. But bartender, aren't 2 of the siblings passive while the third is aggressive? Well, yes, but actually, no. While they don't actively hunt you down and try to beat you like a baby seal, 2 of them will throw projectiles at you, which admittedly are easy to dodge, but they also inflict status ailments, and not to mention the Battle Maniac will use his puppet string to scorpion pull you across the arena from whichever sibling is actively chasing you down into his loving arms and proceeds to beat the brakes off of you. And be equally aggressive because now you're standing next to him and the other passive sibling. They'll both beat on you until you cry for mercy, but there is no mercy. Oh, and unless you perfect parry all of their attacks, you're still going to get status buildup because just guarding doesn't work. The youngest is the most dangerous, especially right off the bat. She's really hard to see as her character model is smaller than you and her attacks are very difficult to predict and parry. And, like I said, because you have to perfect parry, she inflicts decay, so your weapon will decay and you'll take damage over time. Same with the Battle Maniac and Overheat. Eccentric is actually really fun to fight, the guy with the bucket on its head, since his moves are very well telegraphed and shock isn't that annoying to deal with. So yeah. Oh, and at the end of the fight you get a quartz. Whoopee. As for what cocktail I would rank with this, it has to be the espresso martini. This drink just sucks. It's a nothing burger with its popularity sustained by the fact that white women love cold brew coffee and alcohol. Like the boss fight, it's the one on this list I truly despise with my entire being. A garbage fight paired with a garbage drink, and I'm sick of talking about it. Number 16, Door Guardian. This fight is just a whole load of nothing. This Tower Knight wannabe is resistant to pretty much every form of damage, and the only damage that can be done to him is on his right leg. Strafing to the left and hacking away at it only partly works, as his body slams and attacks have very slow windups and every single attack inflicts shock instantly. No build up to a status, just the status inflicted immediately. His movesets are very bland, and his design feels like just a bigger version of some of the Carcass mini-bosses, and his placement just feels really weird. Like he just guards a door, and that's his name. It's stupid. I don't know. The run back is really boring as well, and tedious if you don't take out the turrets and the large Carcass enemies. It's just a boring fight, honestly. I don't have much to say about it. As for the paired cocktail, I gotta go with the Semester Abroad. Not a terrible drink, just not very accessible. Fernet is a very powerful flavor, not to mention a pretty pricey liqueur. At the end of the day, there are just better drinks to be had for a fraction of the cost. Number 15, Puppets of the Future. What can I say? Just like the Door Guardian, these guys are just boring. No boss fight in the history of Souls games that has you slashing at legs all day should be used in the same sentence as fun. It's not fun. It's not an aggravating fight, it's just incredibly boring. Sure, there's one you can fight in a poison swamp, since Neowitz wanted to mimic Miyazaki's love of torture, and while I did fight that one in the swamp, you can drain the poison to make it easier if you're a coward. I think for every fight I had with these guys in my playthrough, I sped the footage up to about 400% because it's just the same thing over and over and over again. There are only two dangerous moves when they do the double leg stomp and their spin to win move. Other than that, these things are just like boar bees. They look intimidating, but they're just nothing. For cocktail number 15, I'm going to go with the Boulevardier. Campari and vermouth are very prominent flavors in this drink. I just don't think bourbon or rye is very forward enough flavor to offset the drink to make it balanced. Its counterpart, the Negroni, is much higher on the list, but I'll get to that later. Not a bad drink, just not quite good enough for me to choose it over the other drinks of this list. Number 14, Mad Clown Puppet. Ugh. Talk about spin to win. There's never a moment of downtime with this guy. He jumps around more than a caffeine-addled kid at a trampoline park, with the self-awareness needed to make you have a terrible time. His moveset is actually really varied with loads of different attacks, but they're all just kind of annoying. His spin to win 6-hit combo is fun to deflect. That is until he hits you with one more uppercut move to fake you out, which feels a little cheap, but not too terrible. It did get me every time. Seriously, watch the playthrough, you'll see. To me, his worst move is the Fury attack he does when he winds up his arm to throw it at you from a distance. It's fun to deflect, but then he'll just spam it over and over and over again. Seriously, I think I got it to like 5 times in a row until I ran in and he just kept doing it with that little 1-2 uppercut that he does. Probably the most annoying boss to me besides the lowest on this list. For cocktail number 14, it's going to be the Fallback cocktail. It pains me to put this one really low on the list because it is a great drink, perfect for cold weather, amazing balance of ingredients. So why is it so low? Well, it takes a full 1/4 ounce of orange bitters to make this, and that's just way too much. Bitters are cheap, but I'd rather just use them for something else. Number 13, Corrupted Parade Master. Reused boss fights are either a big hit or a big miss, and to me, every reused boss fight in Lies of P is a huge miss. Nothing about Corrupted Parade Master does it for me. His moves are very similar and just do decay now, which is annoying. His second phase gets a Lawrence the First Vicar move where he crawls on the ground at you, and he can spawn a carcass mob that's pretty inoffensive so it has low health, but if he hits you, it's a problem. Just an uninspired fight. I think it would have been much better and cooler to have an original boss here. Maybe something the Black Rabbit Brotherhood created themselves, or like a puppet that they re-engineered. I know this one's technically a puppet, but come on. We can be a little more creative here, right? I don't know. Anything but this. Cocktail number 13 is going to be the Whiskey Sour. A fine drink, but it doesn't do much to impress. But sometimes that's all you need. It's simple, enjoyable, but without any bells or whistles. But it is hard to stand up compared to the competition to follow. Number 12, King's Flame Volko. This was probably the first boss fight where I realized that not every boss needs a cinematic opening. Volko's cinematic is probably the worst of them all. It's just him transforming from his car form to his Decepticon form. The fight is fine. Nice telegraphs on most of his attacks except for maybe 1 or 2 that have annoyingly delayed windups. I've noticed in this game, a lot of the difficulty of these boss fights comes from egregiously delayed attacks rather than just complicated or oppressive movesets. I'll talk about it more when there are better examples, but this was one fight I realized I wasn't dying to well-crafted movesets that were hard, but rather just stupidly delayed attacks. Again, the fight is fine. His second phase wasn't really too impressive, especially with his transition move to just shoot flames out of his butt everywhere that instantly overheat you if you don't sprint halfway across the arena to avoid it. Of course, it was until much later that I realized you could just hide behind the pillars, so I do feel a little bit stupid about that, but still. His other flamethrower move instantly overheats you too if it hits you, which I didn't love, but it's pretty easy to avoid if you just stay on his backside. For cocktail number 12, I'm going to go with the Rusty Nail. It's easy, 2 ingredients, and tasty. I love my old man drink, but there's not a lot of evolution with this one. It's a one-trick pony, but it's a damn good drink. It's a great drink, but really only great during the cold winter months. Take this drink to any other seasons when their temperature goes above 50, and it's like a fish out of water. Number 11, Green Monster of the Swamp / Puppet Devouring Green Monster. Okay, let's get this out of the way right now. For bosses that have 2 separate health bars within the same fight, they will be recorded as one boss. If they were actually separate bosses you fight at different times, they would be separate rankings. No one ranks Melania separately, or Radagon and Elden Beast, it's the same fight. You can't have one without fighting the other in the same go. Rant over. Okay, for those of you who saw the gameplay of my first playthrough, you're probably surprised to see this guy this high up, given how much I complained about him. But honestly, after a dozen or so attempts, which honestly that's how long it took me, I actually started to enjoy him. His first phase especially, his Fury Charge is really satisfying to deflect. His little Rampage move is a great opportunity to get behind him and deal some damage. The only move I don't love in his first phase is his giant slam attack where he does 3 in a row, 1, 2, and when he stands up on his hind legs. For his third hit in that combo, it really feels like the Jeopardy music should start playing, and then I can, go file my taxes, get a full 8 hours of sleep, and then he falls down. Another prime example of struggling with not a complex, intricate moveset, but just dying to a weird, overly delayed attack. It's just not very interesting or very good design in my opinion. There were more than a dozen moments in this fight, and really throughout the entire game, that I thought I had perfectly dodged or deflected an attack, only to be hit anyway. I know that's a common complaint with this game, that the parry windows are way too small compared to Sekiro, and I'd have to agree for the most part, but I think the most egregious thing is the Fury attacks. They feel very disproportionately punishing than that of other big attacks. Like, I know that's the point, but even when you do perfectly deflect a Fury attack, it doesn't really give you that much of an advantage a lot of the time, or at least not one that I've noticed every single time. Sure, there are bosses like the Nameless Puppet that give you really nice openings, or like the Green Swamp Monster with when you deflect his Fury Charge attack in his first phase, you get a really big opening to do some damage. But even with smaller bosses like Victor and even some smaller enemies, you don't really get that same advantage. I really think it should be much more rewarding to actually perfect deflect it. Status ailments also ruined this fight for me, as well as some of the insane damage he dishes out. I was told this was a boss that had no patches since release, so yeah, honestly, it needs some patches. I got one shot way too many times than I would like to admit. Definitely my second most hated boss, at least on my first playthrough, behind the Black Rabbit Brotherhood 2, but his enjoyable first phase and design gets him this high up. For the drink I'm going to pair with the Green Monster of the Swamp, it's going to be the Brandy Alexander. It's drink number 11. Similarly to the Rusty Nail, this is a drink that really only works during the cold winter months. It's delicious, and the drink does have a soft spot in my heart, as it was my grandmother's favorite drink. I never really knew my grandmother when she passed away. I was about 7 or 8, but whenever I have a Brandy Alexander, I feel like she's smiling down at me, and that makes me happy. Quick aside, tell someone that you love them. Give them a hug. I've lost 3 people in the last 6 months, 2 incredibly unexpected losses, and it's really shown me, like what Belle says in the game, how quickly life can be gone. Don't waste a chance to tell someone you love them. You might never get the chance to say it again. Anyway, moving on. Number 10, Parade Master. I'm probably gonna get a lot of pushback on this one, but I can't help but be impressed by this fight. Honestly, it's really solid, especially for the first boss fight in the game. It introduces everything about the game's mechanics that the first boss should, the value of perfect deflecting Fury attacks, showing how moves can still be dodged just like any other Souls game, but that perfect parrying is the ideal way to build up stagger, and landing heavy attacks in the white box window is ideal to deal massive damage. I might get some flack for putting him this high on the list, but I honestly can't help it. His second phase is really interesting where he rips his head off and uses it like a hammer. I feel that. Sure, his moveset isn't complex or pressing, but that's not what you want in a first boss fight. You want something that introduces the mechanics. You want something that sets the tone for the rest of the game. And just like other bosses in the Souls genre, I think the Parade Master does that really well here. For the cocktail, number 10, I'm going to choose the Noble Beast. Easily my favorite decadent winter cocktail, but again, like the Brandy Alexander and Rusty Nail, it's really a winter weather exclusive. Not to mention it needs a whole egg, which aren't cheap and aren't great to drink all the time, and a whole ounce of Angostura bitters. Anders, you absolutely crushed it with this drink, but number 10 is the best it can get. Don't hate me, sorry. Number 9, Fallen Archbishop Andreas. This boss fight was the boss I really had to hone in my perfect parrying skills. I'm a huge Sekiro fan. It is my favorite From Software game and the only game I've ever platinumed. I've no-hit Ishin and Allfather, done the Mortal Journey, beat the game on New Game Plus 7 with the Demon Bell and Charmless. But with Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring being my first From Software games, my heart belongs to the roll button. So, when I first picked up Lies of P, I was instinctually trying to dodge a lot. This fight really changed what I was going to do in the fight. It really challenged me to perfect parry almost exclusively, and the fight is very well designed for that. The first phase is very engaging. His claw swipes are well telegraphed, a little too quick sometimes, but not that bad. The tongue lashes he has are entertaining to parry, and the only bad move I can think of is the hind leg stomp and butt slam. I hate delayed attacks. What else is new? The second phase, though, is where things get a little weird for me. The cutscene is super cool, the voice acting is great, the OST is amazing, but the moveset is fine. The one-winged angel side of the fight is just kind of weird. The timing and the distance of the attacks don't really mash up very well, and hitting the one-winged angels is really difficult as he pulls up and back all the time. I found my success coming from going to the original side of the Flexile Sentry wannabe and getting back to the roots of the fight. His giant blue energy explosion, while visually stunning, is really just kind of a run for your life kind of move where you just run away. Yes, you can deflect it, but honestly, in your first time playing through, especially my first time playing through, I just ran away. Good fight. Pretty much every fight from here on, I generally really like and would be happy to fight again. For cocktail number 9, we're going to go with the Sazerac. A New Orleans classic to be sure, and a delightful drink at that. The elegance of combining cognac and rye together for a great drink, but I also think it's just a little too sweet for my tastes. Not to mention that I feel like the absinthe rinse gets lost in the sweetness of the drink. I don't know. New Orleans has some excellent drinks, and one of my favorite drinks of all time, but the Sazerac just isn't it. Number 8, Walker of Illusions. I've only seen a few rankings of Lies of P, but I never see the Walker of Illusions getting any respect. I love the fight, honestly. It really speaks to my Sekiro parrying roots. Her crazy combos you can parry is so interesting, and her moveset is almost the exact same as the enemies that you find in the Grand Exhibition and in the final area, which has a similar design as well. The timing feels natural and fluid, with no real cheap delays just to make it more difficult. Her grab attack where she thrusts forward on her sword can be parried or avoided, and honestly when she hits you with it, it's kind of cool, not gonna lie. The phase 2 when she summons an illusion of herself also really isn't that bad. The illusion has very little health with the same moveset, and the real Walker becomes passive. It really only took me 3 tries, with the first 2 was just downloading her attack patterns in my hippocampus so I can clown on her on the 3rd try. I really enjoyed this fight, and I never see it getting enough love. For cocktail number 8, we're going to go with the Elk's Own. While a delicious drink, and the addition of ruby port to a whiskey sour truly elevates it leaps and bounds above the original, there's just one small problem with the Elk's Own. Really just whiskey sour style cocktails in general, sour style cocktails in general, the mess. The wonderful thing about stirred drinks is that it very rarely creates tons of mess. Whether it's made in the glass or in a mixing glass, it doesn't really create a lot of fuss. You can just rinse it out with some water and you're done. Sour style cocktails that call for an egg white, a whole egg, while delicious, can be a little annoying to clean up after. So despite the Elk's Own wonderful taste and theme, I really can't give it a higher score than 8 on the cocktail list. Number 7, Scrapped Watchman. When I first saw the cinematic opening for this fight, I knew I was in for a treat. The design, the way its head twisted around as it crawled creepily around the tower, peak. And the moveset is super engaging too. He's got a great mixture of wild strikes that you can dash through with correct timing, or choose to perfect parry, as well as what I think is one of the cleanest combos leading into a Fury attack in the entire game. The wind up hit, double wind up slam, also peak. The second phase as well is electric, pun intended. You have to remember everything Patches O'Houlihan taught you: dodge, duck, dip, dive, dodge, and parry your way through. The grab attack he has is very telegraphed and easy to avoid, but devastating if you get caught by it, and honestly the first time I did, I wasn't even mad. It looks awesome. It's so clean. It is the cleanest grab attack animation in the game. The cinematic that plays while it happens is so cool. All around, I think this is the first fight in the game that really prepares you for the awesomeness that is to come for the bosses of Lies of P. For cocktail number 7, we're going to go with the Monte Carlo. And no, I'm not putting it this high because we are technically Carlo. The drink itself is delicious, a great riff on an old fashioned. The herbal Benedictine, bringing the kind of spicy notes of the rye and Angostura forward that really can't be achieved by any other drink. If you've never made a cocktail before, I highly recommend starting with this, or really any other old-fashioned variant, or an old-fashioned itself. They're simple, cheap to make, and very tasty. Number 6, Simon Manus. For a final boss, you could do a lot worse. Dark Souls 2 comes to mind, but still, Simon Manus' Arm of God is an interesting fight, but he didn't really stand out to me in any way. Design-wise, he's a cross between Solomon Grundy and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but with a bowler hat. Seriously, what is it with the Solomon Grundy references in this game? It's really weird. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, his Phase 1 moveset is nothing to write home about, but not offensive either. His swings are really well telegraphed and predictable, except for his overhead slam, which is kind of hard to see coming since his character model blocks the view of the hammer. The Fury attacks have a pretty acceptable delay to them compared to a lot of other Fury attacks in the game. Even if him pulling an Elphaba feels like really unnatural, it's not the worst thing ever. Honestly, he'd be a lot lower on this list if it wasn't for that second phase transition cutscene and the design of Phase 2. My mouth hung open for a good portion of that phase transition when the arm of a literal god comes down to bestow him with the powers beyond comprehension in what I'm assuming to be a Renaissance painting in world, followed by the awakened god releasing from the cocoon on his back. I knew I had to place him high on the list. Phase 2, though, is a little weird for me. I'm not the only one who has that opinion either. His melee moves and physical strikes are really enjoyable now, with him keeping a lot of the same moves from his first phase, but building on them with some new ones. Ergo, what Phase 2 of a boss should be. It's when he spams the off-screen projectiles combined with his aggressive wide-sweeping attacks that just make for an awful time. Sure, the move where the Arm of God comes down from the sky and unleashes a massive explosion is cool and all, but like, why? So I can run away from the boss for a second? I don't like it when bosses do that, where you just have to run away from their move. I'm sure you can parry it, but like, why? Why not just give him more melee attacks with better designs and incorporate the Arm of God into them? That would be really cool for a final boss. But he's just got to stay out of reach of the top 5. It's just not going to happen. For number 6, we're going to do the Martinez cocktail. While it's a great drink, the mixture of gin and sweet vermouth feels a little off to me. I'd still rather have a Martinez than a martini, but I'd also rather have a Manhattan than a Martinez. It's a very well-balanced drink, easy to craft, and I think it definitely fits into the realm of what makes a cocktail desirable on this list. Number 5, Champion Victor. Sometimes all you need is a really good moveset to be a great boss. Starting off the top 5, we have the love child of Bane and Solomon Grundy, Champion Victor. He has an incredible variety of moves that feel so good to deflect and parry your way through, and dodge your way through, honestly. And it's really a crime he didn't have more presentation to go along with it. His Fury attacks are intimidating enough to have me run away from them most of the time, and while I think his final low jab to the gut with most of his combos is pretty cheap, I really didn't think it was completely unfair. It is, for all intents and purposes, a perfect example of how memorizing movesets should go, and just because I didn't memorize it the first time I played, doesn't mean that it's not a great moveset. Similarly to how Champion Gundyr was displayed in Dark Souls 3, Champion Victor is just a big hunk who wants to introduce you to the business ends of his fists, and he does so with such intensity and veracity that I really can't complain too much. The second phase, I think, is one of the few boss fights in this game that doesn't completely rewrite the fight, but rather just expands on what the fight already is, which is how I think it should always be. Gale did it, Soul of Cinder did it, Sister Free did it, hell, even the Scrapped Watchman did it, and that was the second boss fight of the whole game. I really think this is how Neowitz should have made most of their boss fights, instead of hiding separate phases behind an entire health bar and then throwing the entire kitchen sink at you, expecting you to deal with it just as well as the first phase. To me, Champion Victor is the king in that regard, and should honestly earn a higher place if it weren't for the design and movesets of the fights in our top 4. For number 5, cocktail, it's going to be the White Russian. Honestly, I think this cocktail gets way too much hate. It's a delicious drink, perfect for the fall and winter, and really any time of year. It's like a coffee milkshake, super easy to drink and easy to make, and the dude abides. Like Champion Victor, it doesn't get enough love. Number 4, eldest of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. And now it is time for probably my hottest take of the list ranking. I love this fight. Even though I lost the footage of this fight due to corrupted game files the first time I played through, it was honestly my favorite fight of the early mid game. The eldest has one of the most engaging movesets in the entire game, with his wild spinning slashes and intricate combos and flashy moves like his leap into the air, his 5-hit spin to win move, as well as his 3-hit slam attack with a sword. Every third of his health bar, he channels his inner Dominic Toretto and calls upon the power of family to help him as one of his 3 siblings joins the fight. The youngest is First, who's quick, but light attack moves require a lot of precise parries that are very hard to pull off with her small character design. But luckily she's pretty weak, so it's kinda easy to power through that phase. The Eccentric is by far my favorite to fight. He's flashy yet well telegraphed spear strikes and stabs. Honestly, a great time. I like fighting the Eccentric. The Battle Maniac is by far my least favorite, as he can pull you into the fray of the battle and ruin whatever you have going on with his stupid little puppet string. Yeah, I know I get to use it, but still, you shouldn't be allowed to use it either. While each of the siblings are active though, the eldest takes a backseat, occasionally charging at you with predictable timing and tells, easy to avoid, but devastating if you get caught in it. Honestly, this whole fight should be a testament of how gang fights should be done. Not overwhelming, but still necessary to keep your eye out for positioning and timing. Very, very good fight in my opinion. For cocktail number 4, we're gonna go with the Manhattan. Look, classics are classics for a reason. And there's a reason in the almost 200 years since the Manhattan has been around, it is still one of the most popular cocktails in the world. You don't need crazy flavor profiles or high-class ingredients, fires, lighting drinks on fire, crazy garnishes. You don't need any of that to make a timeless classic. The Manhattan is simple, smooth, 3-ingredient cocktail that has stood the test of time for the last 200 years. The Manhattan never fails in my opinion. Number 3, King of Puppets, Romeo. I think it goes without saying that everyone who's ever played the game expected this fight to be in the top 3 or 4. The first phase alone is a pretty good fight, even though in my initial footage I struggled with him quite a bit and I honestly don't love some of his moves, and that's still true. Looking inward, it is a little bit of a skill issue. The moveset's pretty fair and well telegraphed with some elegant twists to an overhead slam, and still telegraphed slashes from the side. Even with being able to perfect parry everything, it's still better to dash through some of his attacks though. When you put him into a staggered state, he doesn't do any continue attacks like a few other bosses I know. His moveset isn't totally oppressive and instead really feels like a bit of a dance, with occasionally quick jabs to catch you off guard. My biggest complaint I'd say for a move is when he starts spinning around and can blow you off your feet into the air seemingly at any distance. I know in one of my attempts I ran clear to the other side of the arena and still it somehow managed to hit me. I don't know. I'm sure there's a better way to avoid it, but I certainly never found it in my first playthrough. My other complaint is that sometimes he seems very passive, like he's just doing his dance into an overhead slam, and then he'll suddenly throw everything he has at you, and it's so overwhelming. I don't love that, but you know, just say I'm bad at the game. Just say I need to get good. It's fine. Then we get to phase 2, where Romeo emerges from the king's armor, wielding the coolest looking scythe I've ever seen, and proceeds to dash around like Sister Freed and Rolana had a love child, except he's a skinny little blonde puppet twink. His moveset is incredible. Well telegraphed attacks that mix up between slow and fast, but never really felt video gamey, except for, you know, maybe a few intentional fake outs that felt a little cheap at sometimes. Pairing him is where I had the most fun in my first playthrough, and I know you can easily exploit the boss by dashing around to his left, which I really only did during his phase transition where the scythe lights up in flames and he does a massively aggressive combo attack, which admittedly is very fun to dodge and not very fun to parry. In that attack combo, he will be in the middle of a swing, then stop with a pause to change direction in the middle of the swing for seemingly no other reason than to trip you up. I don't like it when bosses do that. It feels cheap. It's artificial. I don't like it. It's not my favorite move, and I found more enjoyment in just dodging around him and learning the timings, since a lot of his moves and a lot of moves of bosses in this game in general seem to be designed to just throw you off intentionally. Other than that, I can't praise Romeo enough. It's the kind of fast-paced, keep up or fall behind fight that I love the pacing of, which lands him solidly in my number 3 spot. For cocktail number 3, it's gonna be the Negroni. This might be one of the greatest cocktails I've ever had. Whenever I'm pressed for what to make people, a lot of times I'll go for a Negroni. The sweet vermouth mixed with the Campari gives it a nice bittersweet balance that you don't find in a lot of drinks, with juniper flavors of the gin present to kick you in the pants a little bit. For the series, I made this drink in equal parts, but honestly, I prefer doing a 2-to-1 ratio with 1.5 ounces of gin and 3/4 of Campari and vermouth. Modern tastes for cocktails usually don't lean towards sweet, but they also don't lean towards bitter either. The Negroni is a go-to for me whenever someone asks me to make them a drink, and I like to think that when I make it for them, they really like it. Number 2, Laxasia the Complete. Do I really need to explain this one? She's amazing. Easily the hardest boss in the game, in my opinion. And with her presentation, moveset, music, cutscene, general ambiance of the fight, it's hard to call this boss anything other than majestic. So, let's break down my feelings about her. Her moveset, especially for her first phase, is incredible. Her 13-hit uppercut that admittedly feels video gamey and unnatural, which I would normally complain about, but I get so much satisfaction perfect blocking all of those hits that I really can't complain that much. The rest of her moves are pretty neat as well. A little slow and needlessly delayed sometimes, given that we can see her whip the sword around with lightning speed at the drop of a hat. Breaking her shield is a must as it carries into her second phase, but luckily with a little patience and decay, it's pretty easy to break. Her jumping overhead slam when she runs up to you, especially in the beginning, is very satisfying to deflect, as well as her big roundhouse double swing. Knocking her into a downstate triggers a final overhead slam charged with electricity, but it's so easy to avoid that I really don't have any problems with it. Then we come to phase 2. Ugh, boy oh boy, this phase is just the wildest, most chaotic ride in the game. Her opening move, shooting lightning at you, is pretty easy to deflect, even without having ever seen it before. That is until she does her Superman dive at you, which the only way to deflect is just to internalize the timing of it. It wasn't that hard for me, but it still took a few times, and I think a better way to pull it off is just giving her some telegraph for it, instead of just memorizing the timing. I think that would be a better design for it. In the second phase, now, Laxasia is lightning fast, pun intended, zipping around you and slashing at you with her new-ish sword. A few of her moves I find very fun to deflect, while others, I'll break it down. The move where she runs to the side, jumps into the air, does a double attack has a very nice rhythm to it, while occasionally adding in a lightning dash that you can either dodge, parry, or just walk out of the way of. When she jumps into the air, parrying the lightning back at her will damage her like her opening phase, and that's honestly really fun to deflect too. It's just sometimes she does one lightning bolt, and then sometimes she does 2 lightning bolts, and I can't really tell how she's going to do one or the other. Now for moves I'm really not crazy about. Occasionally she'll do her little lightning dash to the side to strike you, but instead of striking right away once she dashes, she'll do a little pause to throw you off and then strike. I can't say it enough. I hate it when bosses do this. I don't like it. It feels gimmicky, video gamey, just to throw you off for no other reason than to throw you off. We've already seen how she swings the sword with such ease and then she just freezes for no reason. Like a statue. Literally, she just pause the frame there if you want. She does not move. Is completely frozen and then just hits you. It's really annoying. Delayed attacks are one thing. This just feels cheap. Another quick point of contention I have is when you land a stagger blow on her in this phase. Charged attacks and Fable Arts can be slow and difficult to land to full effect, So you're already taking a big risk trying to land this on such a mobile boss who gives you so little downtime. It's when you do land it that normally, and what I think would be really nice, is if you got a reward for landing such a risky attack. Except mixology doesn't do this. Normally, you're rewarded with the opportunity to get a few quick slashes and maybe end a critical blow. Except mixology decides that she's going to do 2 more slashes after you land it, and then explode in lightning, and then allow you to land the blow that you worked so hard to pull off. It feels very cheap and artificially difficult. Still, even with these complaints, I love mixology the Complete. It is fast, chaotic, adrenaline boosting brawl, and it requires you to learn almost every move to perfection in order to beat. I was ready to have her be my favorite boss at Liza P until I met someone else. For cocktail number 2, it's going to be the La Louisiane. This drink is to me what perfect balance is. Spicy rye, smooth sweet vermouth, balanced out with herbal notes of Benedictine with accents of Angostura and Peychaud's, rinse of absinthe in a chilled glass and a large rock of ice. I don't think there are many drinks out there that can beat this one. It's an elevated Manhattan with more nuance and flavor profiles. I would call it my favorite drink in the world, if not for one other drink. A drink I've been making for years, and consistently what I gravitate towards time and time again. But still, we have one more boss fight left to cover. Number 1, the Nameless Puppet. I'm gonna rant a bit here, so strap in. I'm a sucker for final boss fights. Ishin the Sword Saint, Slave Knight Gale, Soul of Cinder, Ratigan of the Golden Order, even the Promised Consort has become a favorite for me. So when I heard about the Nameless Puppet fight, I was immediately intrigued. For a while though, I did see a few people saying the Nameless Puppet was one of the hardest fights ever. Like, I would consistently see him in people's top 5 hardest of all time. Like those tournaments that people do when everybody votes for their favorite boss, I would really see him in the top 5 consistently. I'm not usually one to call people crazy for their takes on these games because they're super subjective, but yikes, if you think the Nameless Puppet is hard, you will not like what FromSoft has in store for you. Anyway, back to the boss. Everything from the setting to the moveset to the design of the boss just works perfect for me. Like a lot of people, I love the meta of Souls games where you have these disgusting monsters or mechanical marvels, even gods themselves you have to fight. And then everyone's favorite boss is just a dude with a sword. Nameless Puppet to me felt like a diet Ishin. Relax, I don't think he holds a candle to the Sword Saint, I never said that. Ishin is my favorite boss in FromSoft's lineup, tied with Gale, and it's not even close. The reason I'm making a comparison, a small comparison, of the Nameless Puppet to him is where his Phase 2 moveset is. It's stellar to me. Phase 1 isn't exactly anything to write home about, I'll be honest. It's serviceable, but still fun. A few delayed attacks, the 3-hit combo I like deflecting. But Phase 2 is when it just all comes together. The strings are cut, and the Nameless Puppet brings out all the stops. Now his dual swords are lightning fast, imbued with blood and fire, akin to Lady Maria, but even more aggressive. A lot of people have a big problem with multi-phase boss fights, where each phase is radically different. Beast Clergyman turning into Malekith the Black Blade, Godfrey turning into Horlu, Ratigan into the Elden Beast. I've even seen a few people complain about Mesmer, which just sounds wholeheartedly undemocratic. Sorry, I've been playing a lot of Helldivers 2 in my off time for managed democracy. Where was I? Oh right, yeah, boss ranking. I've never had a problem with any of those wildly different boss phases, except for maybe Elden Beast, but come on. I love the transition into Phase 2 for the Nameless Puppet, especially from a narrative standpoint. Phase 1 is bound by the control of Geppetto, and therefore can't go too crazy at the risk of destroying Carlo's heart. I think that's great storytelling. Then, when the strings are cut, and Geppetto loses control of the puppet, the gloves come off, and the Nameless Puppet throws everything it can at you. The only combo string I can think of that carries over from Phase 1 is his 3-hit combo, that has the exact same timing, except now there's a slightly delayed 4th attack on the end of it. Love that combo. His quick dash into a twirling attack with 4 rapid hits is great to deflect, but also safe enough to guard through. And then attack to get your health back. When he leaps into the air, spins around to the ground, you can easily dodge or walk around to get a few hits in. The leap backwards into a wide sweeping blood flame attack not only looks and feels like how Ishin does it with his leaping spear sweep attack, but it feels equally satisfying to dodge. Okay, maybe not equally, but come on, give me a break. The colors of the red flame against the dark blue background, just stunning. Everything about this boss works for me, and I love it. It didn't feel overly difficult or cheap with unfair BS moves that just one-shot you. Every time I died, it felt like it was my own fault for mismanaging my pulse cells, forgetting about a move in a combo, or mistiming an attack. It felt fair and more like a dance than any other fight in this game, except for maybe the King of Puppets. I really don't see this guy getting enough credit. I think he really deserves higher in other people's rankings. So, to cap off this ranking and this video off, we've got my favorite cocktail in the world. Number 1, the Old Fashioned. Not only one of the oldest drinks in the world, the Old Fashioned is the drink I've been making for the longest. It is a timeless classic, sweet, spicy, smooth, and classy. It is the picture of refined elegance and dignity, while requiring precise measurements and skill to make. You'd be surprised how easy it is to mess up an Old Fashioned. I don't anymore, but it took me a long time to get there. I don't order the Old Fashioned when I go out, since very few places make one I actually like. The Old Fashioned is my favorite drink in the world, and maybe in the future, if y'all want, I'll show you how to make my preferred version of it. So there you guys go. My ranking of all the bosses in Lies of P, as well as all the cocktails I made on the channel. If you want to check out my playthrough and the cocktails that I make and all the recipes therein, you can check it out. I'll link it in the description below. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm sure I rubbed some people the wrong way with this ranking, but this is the first ranking video I've ever made public, and really just ever made, because I'm brand new to this whole YouTube thing. I'm sure if you have differing opinions of me, you'll accost me in the comments. Feel free. And if you guys like what you saw here, if you think the idea of mixing cocktails and video games is an interesting prospect, I'm doing this kind of thing right now. I'm playing Hollow Knight while making cocktails themed around those bosses, themed around the game itself. So if you want, like and subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys in the bar next time. Cheers.